You know, guys, sometimes when I look at my skin, I feel so grateful that I have skin of light and not darkness.
Gosh, Sora, are you confusing light and darkness with racism?
Oh, better get that.
Hey, Sora. Apologies, but someone wants a word with you.
Well, hello there.
Clayton!
Not Clayton.
But I thought you were dead.
I am dead. That's why I'm calling you.
You see, I've been paying close attention to your ongoings as of late.
How?
I connected with my heart or something, I don't know. Anyway,
I couldn't help but notice that you and your friends seem to be resurrecting dead people all willy-nilly, and honestly,
I'm the only person who actually got properly murdered, so if you wouldn't mind...
Oh, the signal died. Hang on. Sorry about that. Carry on.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind pulling some hijinks to bring me back, that'd be really...
No can do.
Why? Why in Godzilla's name, why not?
Because you're a villain.
You literally brought back a horde of mad scientists with blood on their hands and then let them off the hook.
Excuse me, I think you'll find they were deceived, actually.
Is that all it takes? I just have to say...
Oh, gone again. Hello.
I just have to say I was deceived and then I'll get to live free as an ape?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
okay, the duck deceived me.
What did Donald do to you?
I can't tell you because I have PTSD from the experience.
Gasp! Well, why didn't you say so? Donald, I can't believe you would deceive Clayton. You know what that means. It sure is good to always be on the side of justice, isn't it? Anyway, better get Clayton a new body. Adventures away!
Hee hee. Just you sit tight, you insolent boy. I'll be the only victim of bloody murder no longer.
Pardon me. I couldn't help taking an interest in your conversation. Perhaps we could be of mutual assistance. One day, I'll create a normal intro. I'd save myself a lot of time and effort, but it was important to hopefully make you laugh and lift your spirits. It'll make it easier to contemplate how in the real world, happy endings don't really exist. Death is inevitable, and so is the loneliness preceding. Couples rarely die together. We'd love to imagine we'll draw our last breath hands interlaced with our true love. But if you're lucky, you'll spend a year without them. Perhaps a week if your stars align. And somehow that's the optimistic perspective. How many people are watching or have watched this video? Is it statistically likely that all of you will die content? Will 100% of you be lucky enough to not spend the last several years living the way you feared you might? If you're like me, the moment you begin to ponder the possibilities, you run away. You hide inside the cozy realm of fiction, a world where you can rely on things to turn out in the best possible outcome. And I think that's the importance of a happy ending. Happy endings give us something to hold on to. They feed us the temptatious belief that through strong will alone, all you desire will come true. A universe where ideal satisfaction isn't difficult, but guaranteed. Without happy endings, escapism becomes bleak. However, I think writing a good happy ending is more challenging than we think it is. Anyone can finish a story with true love or the world being saved, but to have a happy ending that everyone is on board for, that doesn't feel cheap or unsatisfying or against the story being told, is a strenuous task. Snow White is an 87-year-old movie experienced by millions every year. And outside of alternative, piercing, sporting, probably closeted teenagers, I don't think anyone has ever claimed Snow White's revival from death was unearned or out of touch with what the viewer hoped for, despite how blatantly illogical it is. And this is true of most Disney stories. The platinum standard for happily ever afters. By the rolling of the credits, everyone's in the best place they could be with the love of their life, a heavenly backdrop to accompany them, living in the perfect visualization of whimsy. And we never think to ourselves the endings are too happy. They're exactly how they should be. They don't shy away from blessing you with the best possible payoff, and they're timeless because of it. Considering it's also a Disney property, surely the same should be said for Kingdom Hearts. For half the fan base it seems to be. For many, this ending sequence was worthy of an evening of crying. But though you may ignore it, it's well known that happy endings published upon every character fail to leave a pleasant taste in every fan's mouth. You probably assume I opposed the idea from the beginning. Why else would I make this video otherwise? Well, 13 years ago when this story path was made apparent, I was accepting. Excited even. Young Harry would get to see his favourite characters again, and there was zero question it would be written beautifully, of course. I'm getting old, and times have changed. Maybe I've just grown more bitter. Maybe I'm not happy enough for this ending. I don't know though. Even during my darkest days, and there are a few of those, I've never loved the ending of 2 any less.
When you and I, there's a new land.
This ending is masterful. For reasons obvious to both you and I, an ending extraordinarily earned over the course of a trilogy of games, a direct contrast to the ending of the initial title, the most conclusive conclusion this series may ever see. But there's more to it than that, because this happy ending has never been 100% happy. Sometimes I think of it as bittersweet. Anytime Sora and Kairi are together, so will Roxas and Namine. That's the impression they give. But it's clear they're not able to live their own lives. They have to return to their original beings because that's their best possible fate. And along the way, how many other lives were sacrificed to get here? Kingdom Hearts 2's ending is beautiful and worthy of tears of joy, but it doesn't disguise the darkness that got you there. And that's the real Disney magic. Most Disney stories are only happy to a degree. The princess who marries her handsome prince is also an orphan with only animals or idiots for company. Characters suffer humongous horrors, sometimes devoid of a silver lining. But if those details weren't present, would the endings be as powerful? Perhaps they bring them down to a level we as people can understand, and that's the detail cementing their acclaim. Or maybe it's just that the Kingdom Hearts series is like a public urinal in a bus station, and over the years, it's become predictably unsanitized and littered with meaningless graffiti. Whatever that analogy means, here's how the video will be laid out. We'll begin with a general overview and thought spillage of reviving dead Kingdom Hearts characters. Following that, we will be diving into each character's revival, contemplating if it was a good decision, how it contrasts to their story, as well as every other detail that leaps to mind. And most excitingly of all, I don't know what my opinions on these will be yet. We'll discover that together. Right then, off we go. A philosophy I believe in is there are no bad story ideas. There are premises that sound nauseating on paper, but the execution will always take greater precedent. If we found out tomorrow that Sora's journey will culminate in him carrying Goofy's heart in his rear end, causing severe arse inflation, we'd all be thinking, no, what a terrible idea to have Sora carrying Goofy's heart, causing severe arse inflation. And in all the days leading up to release, there'd be media outrage over Sora carrying Goofy's heart, causing severe arse inflation. But then the game releases and Sora carrying Goofy's heart, causing severe arse inflation is beautifully written, stunningly poetic, and ties into the rest of the story up to this point. And suddenly, it will feel like there was no other way the story could have been told than Sora carrying Goofy's heart, causing severe arse inflation. Basically, what I'm trying to say is every single dead or not quite dead or whatever character coming back in the end could have been written magically. If I tell you at any point in this video that a character should have stayed gone, it means the likelihood of it working well is particularly lacking. Not that it could never work at all, because that's the magic of storytelling. There are limits to this philosophy of mine. For example, if Riku placed a bigoted label on Kairi's head, shrunk her, stepped on her, put on a Nazi hat, and then monologued for 10 minutes about his newfound swastika blade, no matter the execution, my immediate reaction would of course be, well, at least Sora didn't hog the spotlight this time. Anyway, the potential of the dead character's returning storyline was always there. Dare I say it seemed promising by the end of Dream Drop Distance. For all the maddening story decisions, the extraordinarily wonky storytelling, and the foreshadowing of some in hindsight not wonderful character ideas, this game did get me excited for the grand conclusion. And you know what? I still think this game has a decent amount of good writing. I love this scene with Riku and Data Ansem. The stage for the end of the saga is set by slowing everything down. A calm, powerful conversation, observing and reflecting upon the environment our characters live in, and the natural, innocent abilities of the main character. And when Ansem told us there was data inside Sora existing as a hopeful solution for all the wrongs committed, I was invested. It was intriguing, creative, and earned. More so than a black box ever was. The stakes were established. The new organization had made their epic entrance, with that ethereal theme playing. There was every reason to believe the return of these tragic characters would be legendary. I didn't know these moments were going to make like Radiant Garden and turn out so hollow. I suppose it was a bit of an uphill battle in hindsight. The cast of characters has gotten so enormous that dedicating valuable time to everyone involved must be suffocatingly intimidating. Maybe we should ask ourselves, would it have been possible to bring back every Kingdom Hearts character and give each of them an ideal amount of attention, importance, and usage? If you answered no, congratulations, you win this free fireplace to throw yourself into, you muppet. JRPGs are expansive. Over the course of them, you can expect to run into more characters than real-life friends. So in my case, at least 2 characters. Final Fantasy VII is around 30 hours, and most of that is padded via random battles and DeviantArt's category creation. And yet it absolutely managed to offer every character, of which there were a lot, enough spotlight to attach our emotions to them. So Kingdom Hearts 3, even with the weight of Disney properties on its shoulders, could have done the same. Avengers Endgame did it.
Assemble.
Because ultimately, across every movie and every newly introduced character, it's all heading towards that grand battle. In fact, if I can love the Battle of Endgame despite how absent interactions between characters are, shouldn't the epic Remind battle be the very same? It's got the spectacle that I crave, the character interactions I demanded, and what is basically a blatant apology for making a character useless in the base story. No, it still doesn't really. I mean, I do love this 10 minutes. It's glorious, immaculate, perfection. But when I watched the characters return in Endgame, I fully believed and understood everything that led to this point. Meanwhile, even in the current year, I'm still not sure how Xion showed up with every memory of her intact, and I don't care to learn why because it wouldn't change a cocking thing. Also, I don't have to re-watch the first 2 hours of Endgame a second time over to gain access to the final battle. That helps. And even with this DLC story attempting to right its wrongs, it can't shake itself from the shackles of the original finale, because it's still there. The grand character returns in 3 are like gaining a new follower on social media. A momentary rush of adrenaline, but nothing of value comes of it afterwards. And I know there are a portion of fans who will tell me these characters will get their time to shine in the next game, or the game after that, 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 and maybe they will. But that doesn't and won't alter my cynical feelings towards how it's done here and now. Speaking of Kingdom Hearts 3 and Avengers Endgame, the latter also works by having the main character cark it. And if I mention how the lack of consequence for all the happy endings agitates me, of course the natural response will be to say, what about Sora fading? Surely that's the greatest consequence of all. Maybe, if the framing was different. But this isn't framed like a tragedy. It's framed like an advertisement for the next entry. Especially as death is so little of a concern now that who could care? That's another issue. By essentially creating replica immortality, why should I be concerned about the fate of anyone? The tension is absent, their invulnerability is too apparent. And to be fair, this is an issue that media like this often falls into. Once upon a time, if a Dragon Ball character drew their last breath, it was horrifying. The weight was felt across the rest of the season. But eventually, death became comparable to, letting a boiled egg go to waste? I'd even call the latter more deadly. The solution for this was to get more creative with the stakes. When Vegeta fought Buu, he was already dead, meaning if he was murdered again, there'd be nothing of him left. No soul, no atoms, nothing to carry on. Of course he survived, but it was always a moment I liked, and it's why in the next Kingdom Hearts game, I kind of want something terrible to happen. What if, for example, the new antagonist introduced themselves by setting Destiny Islands on fire? Sora's on a mission with Donald and Goofy, receives an alert on the gummy phone, speeds off with enormous anxiety to find his home in flames. Of course that isn't going to happen, but it would be a reason to feel fearful again. And currently, my only fear is that one of my favourite characters gets bastardized some more. So those are my general thoughts. In summary, bringing back every character could have worked and the potential was there, but it didn't for reasons that have been repeated again and again. But I'm talking like the Guardians of Light are the only revived characters. And if that were the case, well, we wouldn't be here wondering what happened to Billy Zane.
I've come to see the door to this world.
There's a common trope long-running media can fall into. Introducing a villain early on, establishing that character as the ultimate threat, needing to up the ante and outdo that villain with other villains as the story continues, but because the character is popular, we see them again and again, despite them growing progressively less threatening with every subsequent appearance. Ansem Sod isn't exactly the same, but I have never in my life seen someone claim he was at his scariest in 3 or DDD or even Com, which isn't necessarily the fault of the writing. I'll stick up for Richard Epcar, but it wasn't the most seamless transition from one actor to the other.
Kingdom Hearts!
Either way, I accept his return for the following 3 games after KH1 because it wasn't the same character. It was a scar on Riku's conscience that followed him and inspired his growth. And when Riku wore his face, it was like watching your childhood nightmare return to haunt you. Except for Riku, far, far worse. But in Dream Drop Distance onwards, this is the character we defeated in the first game. But he's not a threat. He's a nuisance, a disconcertingly Riku-obsessed stalker who only exists as a prelude for the actual antagonist. And yet, without him, Riku wouldn't have that extra piece of character that finalized his journey. When I keep that in mind, I can't easily say I prefer him gone. Alright then, maybe keeping Xehanort Heartless around was the right move. In which case, let's ask ourselves, how could he have kept the intimidation of the first game in the later games? I'm improvising, but let's imagine the epic battle between him and Riku occurred midway through the Mark of Mastery. But make use of the scarier design of the character. The hood. Fear of the unknown, right? We may know what's under that disguise now, but even the brief absence of it again would instill a little more fear. One of the more memorable shots in the original game was this one after all. Once he's arrived early on, shift the focus. Don't settle for just taunting Riku, have him tear into his psyche. Have a little preliminary battle between the two characters early on. Maybe craft a world entirely designed to prey on Riku's terrors, cut off from his friends, filled with hallucinations of himself at his lowest. At the end of this hypothetical sequence, after continuous powerful interactions between the two, Riku and Xehanort Heartless would face off. The same battles and dialogue would take place, the only difference being we'd get earlier clarification that what we're seeing isn't an illusion but the real evil. And Sora still wouldn't know that, increasing Riku's anxiety at their situation. There is one problem with this idea, namely we'd be treading old territory. In fact, on some level, DDD already takes away from Riku's Chain of Memories arc, but if you commit heavily enough to the concept and offer a deserved level of stage presence and build on the newly established lore, it'd have an identity of its own. Doesn't really answer the question of what to do with him in 3. Fortunately, I think his data fight tells me exactly what was needed. All you need is a battle focused on him with proper epic impact. Allow him to monologue like he used to. Have him create a world that puts Sora in a position of vulnerability again. And with the power of the PS4, do what the first game didn't. Add some god-tier spectacle. Once you do that, I might just feel the intimidation of the evil entity that this series began with again. Oh, and of course, this character resolution can Ansem sod off, so in the end, I feel his inclusion was essential enough to justify his returning. And we all love a big baddie ensemble, right? But if you want to up the ante and maintain a prior villain's stage presence, well, that's an arduous task. Or you could just do the opposite. Hello, Maleficent.
Behold the mistress of all evil!
The subject of this video will mostly relate to recent entries, but my circle jerking has a limit, and even in my young naivety, this scene raised an eyebrow.
Haven't we seen this somewhere before?
Yes, dear. I wonder whose it was.
Oh, Maleficent!
No, we mustn't remember her name. Oh dear.
Oh no, the memories are coming back. What'll we do? Oh, what'll we do? Maleficent!
Remembering Maleficent brings her back, which took an entire year to do. There's only one logical assumption here. After saving the universe, everyone immediately fell down the stairs. How else can you explain this phenomenally selective amnesia? Maleficent's writing in 2 was a contentious being.
Clumsy.
And personally, I call it an acquired taste. The transition is perhaps heavy to swallow at first, especially for anyone bewitched by her power as the leader of the villain assemblage. But that's what makes her present as essentially a washed-up has-been all the greater. Perhaps the criticisms towards her here are cut from the same cloth as my critique towards Xehanort's Heartless, but the difference is the game is entirely aware of how she's being handled now. She tries to reclaim her dominating power but can't. Her evil lair is shared with Pete, how humiliating, and a perfectly simple showcase of how the new threat is much greater than she will ever hope to be. In fact, if you're familiar with an obscure piece of bonus content that came with Final Mix Plus, you'll know that making her a pawn in the grand plan was a deliberate move by the organization, which feels natural because she was always a tool in the larger scheme of things. And while I enjoy her character in the first game, her 2 best moments across the series take place in 2. I'll always stand by that. Wasn't perfect, mind you. A boss fight with her would have been nice, and this scene here is totally misleading. But her and Pete soldiering into the abyss of shadows, all for the sake of our heroes of light. Should that have been it for them? It would have been odd if we'd never heard from them again. But I do know this. Among the miserably bloated cast of characters, if there is anyone I would remove to make a little more breathing room, it'd be this lot, but then it would be Maleficent and Pete. We know they've contributed bugger all to the story since, but not only that, their black box quest could just as easily belong to any other character. In fact, it already is really, so why are they here? Here's my pitch. I'd give Maleficent and Pete one more scene, in the ending credits. A scene that shows they're alive in Traverse Town. Think about it. The world that never was became nothing. They've got to wind up somewhere, and that is the town's purpose. That can be their new home, where they're forced to live day after day. Maybe Maleficent's scepter got smashed in the process and she's all the more helpless. That'd be a sad and fitting end for them, I feel. I think I have a fondness for loneliness, in the sense that a character's isolation often automatically makes them more compelling. That's a philosophy applied to many characters across Kingdom Hearts. But one character in particular knows that world differently to everyone else.
I've been alone for so long.
Yes, yeah. Of course she had to return. Otherwise we wouldn't have the greatest moment of Kingdom Hearts 3. This blessed 2 seconds of otherworldly beauty and a smile worthy of an angel. Except Remind edited the scene so her face looks weird. Nomura, did I murder your dog in a past life or something? Namine has been an outlier among the Kingdom Hearts cast for most of her not-existence. Her purpose was fulfilled and now she's a loner with no obvious friend group to belong to, unlike the rest. The box art for 3 really does all the talking for me. Look at her. It's like when your school friends all pick each other for the group project, leaving you out. Many would argue the introduction of one such puppet removed her relevance even further. But honestly, I'm glad to have a character that isn't part of a trio for once. I'm really quite tired of every character getting sorted into a group of 3 because it just seems to limit their interactions with other characters and divides them into their own lanes. Heck, even the terrible Subject X plotline looks like it could be forming yet another trio. This is where Namine is special. And that's about as much goodwill as I can give her. Look, I'm sorry, her character was wrapped up 18 years ago. Her work was done, her fate was bittersweet, and it was natural. There's nothing left for her to do, and her connections to other characters aren't even as strong as they are with each other. She seemed to have a powerful bond with Roxas, but that's a long time ago now and all but forgotten. I always chose to believe she developed a close relationship with Riku across the years Sora slept, but that's only a headcanon. I suppose there is her connection with Replica. You know, the connection that doesn't exist anywhere in her writing, no matter how strongly felt the creator insists it is. I feel a stronger connection between my subscribers and an exercise mat. Perhaps I'm being unfair by insinuating Namine has to have some grand greater purpose to justify her revival. Why can't her deserving a happy life be enough of a reason? Well, in addition to my prior points, there's also the fact that you can't bring her back without going against her original ending. It doesn't matter how well written her revival as her own person could be, by writing it, you're invalidating her resolution as it was before. And that's a problem that can't be solved. Although I guess it lines up considering none of Kingdom Hearts 2's story matters anymore. The character endings, the organization's mission, all washed of importance by later games. It makes me wonder if any of 3's story will matter by the credits of 4. Remember this train of thought when that game releases. At the end of the day, I love Namine. How couldn't you? The purest, cutest bubble of innocence there is. But I think the fact that we've stretched out this Thank Namine subplot as long as we have indicates just how little else there is to do. But there is one other factor. It would be strange to leave her behind, not bringing her back, while also bringing Roxas back. I suppose that's the next topic of discussion.
Does that mean it's time for me to go back to where I belong?
The Kingdom Hearts storyline exists in the shape it does now almost entirely due to fan service, which makes sense considering the entire premise is based upon pandering towards two sources of nostalgia, but that's not what I mean. I mean that 18 years ago, Axel died. But surprise, Axel's popular, so he gets brought back. Roxas and Xion essentially die, surprise, they're also popular. Nomura feels he has no choice but to resurrect them. You can have whatever feelings you want about his comeback, but the reasoning behind it should bother you at least mildly. Because it's admittance the decision was made, not because it was the right move, but because if you scream about your feels at a deafening enough level, the sound waves will travel across Mother Earth straight into Nomura's ears. What a precedent that sets. At least Nomura doesn't listen to the shipping community too strongly. It would have been real difficult to justify Kingdom Hearts 3 ending in an orgy. The most anticipated resurrection was always going to be Roxas's. He's won every popularity contest for as long as I've been in the fandom. He's the character fans are most emotionally tortured by. And the fanfare behind his reveal certainly shows awareness of that. I didn't want to admit this for a long time. It took me a good while to come to terms with it, but Roxas and Xion both became less interesting to me once you give them a happy ending. That isn't to say their tragedies were the solitary appeal of them, but then again, maybe that isn't too far off either. Roxas and Xion exist as Sora and Kairi if they lived a doomed destiny. The inevitability of their fates made their moments of humanity shine all the brighter. Give them a happily ever after, and now they aren't too dissimilar from the rest of the cast. Also, there are a couple of blatant plot problems that come from this. I've seen many a curious person ask how Roxas can still dual wield, and there's no need to recap the answers because the real reason is because people like it. In fact, I could shorten my scripts by explaining most plot threads in that manner. Secondly, I'm not very keen on Roxas living alongside a clone of himself. I won't be talking about the restoration of the BBS trio because unlike Roxas, they were established to have an eventual return within the same game they were introduced. I partially ponder the timeline where they remained prequel characters only, but I ultimately accept it and appreciate the good they've brought into other games as well. Ventus, however, was always an explanation for a plot point that didn't need explaining. And putting him with Roxas together only weakens the presence of the probably most well-written character in the franchise. It's great for the ha-ha funny memes and the fan art, but when we recap the newly entrenched story elements, Roxas has a heart, and someone else's appearance, and a happy ending. It's hard to feel that he's unique anymore. With all that in mind, I think a Roxas return could be done very well. By simply having the ending not be consequenceless. Bittersweetness is Roxas's lane. It's always been where his writing shined the darkest. The possibility I'm about to offer would never occur, but I'm pondering it enough to want to share it. What if Roxas could only live if Sora doesn't? His fate was always sealed by having to return to him. What if Sora sacrificed himself to let Roxas live a life? Or what if in desperation to bring Roxas back, someone else put an end to Sora instead? I would never expect that to happen, but I love a moral conundrum. Returning to the more plausible alternative story paths, all three of the Sea Salt trio survived 3 tragedies. I think to get the most emotional value, at least one of them shouldn't have. Take your pick, but one in particular is obvious.
This puppet will have to play her part.
Oh, Gian. In preparation for this video, I replayed 358 Days Over 2. My last playthrough was in December 2018. This was my first time playing it in a post-Kingdom Hearts 3 world, and a question lingered in my brain. Would I still cry? I was fearful, nervous that I wouldn't be able to separate this story from what followed, but I set that concern aside as I played the game, and once I reached day 357, I decided to open Audacity.
It's weird. I feel like I'm forgetting something really important.
Better off now. It was my
else will I have ice cream?
Oh man. I guess some tales can never lose their impact. But I need to bring up this next point anyway. During the discussion surrounding giving tragic characters less tragic conclusions, a common argument point is the happy endings don't take away from the terrible things the characters went through. They still happened, and they're still equally a cause for heartbreak. Perhaps they're right, but come on now. You know emotions don't work like that. No matter how strongly you can disconnect two stories, they both will always influence one another, even if it's only a little nag at your brain for a second. It's the same conversation people have regarding separating art from the artist. You can believe an artist's opinions or history won't influence how you feel about their work, but if you also believe genuinely that they're a bad person, your love for the work in question will be compromised, even if by a fraction. And the reality is, no matter how deeply immersed I become in the heartbreaking tale of these three, the knowledge of its undoing will always linger, even if only deep in my subconsciousness. Gian in particular was the most contentious choice to revive. Her death is universally known as the saddest moment in the series, at least by non-monsters anyway. Both her theme music and her battle music are among the most beloved tracks Yoko has ever produced, even before the movie remasters. Her story resonates, and it resonates heavily. On top of that, her fate was sealed more tightly than anyone else, prompting everyone to wonder, how could you write a positive ending for a character that had all memories of her erased? Well, now we know the answer. You can't. Your only option is to fiercely try and pull yourself out of the corner you've written yourself into, but the established plot point is too difficult to undo. Hence why the reasoning behind her comeback is gibberish and everyone recalls her effortlessly. Even now, as I contemplate alternate solutions for this character, I can't think of anything. Time travel perhaps? That would still feel cheap. It's why in the end I don't agree with bringing back Gian. However, if you've decided to, make it dark. I've pitched the idea before of her remaining forgotten by everyone. It's the natural path, I think, but there are other paths to take. What if Gian returned as how she started? Blank, faceless project number I. Sora's memories don't define her any longer. It's only logical she'd have nothing to give her character anymore. In fact, her gimmick used to be that everyone sometimes saw her with a different face. What happened to that, huh? See what I mean when I babble on about how nonsensical her return was? All of the details that make up her character form such an impossible puzzle to deconstruct, so the only solution is to just hand-wave it away, with the hand of a replica, the buzzword for solving any plot contingency. And I'm sorry. I am really, really sorry. I don't like her new outfit either. The organization cloak was always so S-tier, especially with her jet black hair, that giving her anything else would always be a challenge. But for one thing, I don't think it offers her much personality, especially considering it's not too different from Kairi's getup. And also, fuck collars. I hate collars. My secondary school-induced collar trauma will never fully heal. I'm not saying I could make a better design for her, but Twitter user Omniform Blue could. Look at the style, look at the personality. If Gian needs casual wear, this is what my brain chooses to see. Wonderful work, link to their page in the description. Thinking about it, if Gian were the only one to remain gone, things would come close to being how they were before. Because we all know Gian wasn't planned during the writing of Kingdom Hearts 2, and every yellow moon I do ponder how different the series might feel if the sea salt duo had remained as such. Perhaps there's something to that. We'll leave that thought for the moment, because if we're to discuss the fates of these two, it only makes sense who we tackle next.
Why do I always get stuck with the icky jobs?
I suppose he's the catalyst for all the other happy ever afters. All it took was a few too many fangirls vocalizing their adoration of the flurry of dancing flames, and back he was. So basically, the popularity of Akuroku fucked up the Kingdom Hearts storyline forever. I'm not sure if I'm joking there either. But in the end, I welcome his return. Well, mostly. The thing is, Axel's character arc was so close to being perfect. It was ambitious and risky to evolve him from the rogue, almost assassin to the kidnapper turned sacrificial savior. And before 358, I'm sure this was too drastic a change for some. But it worked on the principle that Axel across both games was morally dubious. Well, perhaps morally dubious is a generous description for bursting Vexen into flames, but I appreciate that his unhinged manner of thinking didn't vanish even after a year of bromance. A year that we got to witness nigh every day of. Most characters across this series dream of that level of attention, so when he returned with the goal of assisting the protagonists, I loved it. This shot of him in the mysterious tower with the gang still makes me smile. So I guess I'm glad he returned. But then again, am I? His comeback is fantastic to witness, but does it actually add enough to the character to justify it? It officially makes him a protagonist, that counts as growth. But is it worth undoing his natural mournful ending? One of the beautiful aspects of the Sea Salt trio was they all died in different points, like their proof of existence slowly vanished over time. I was going to say that maybe Axel should have been the one member to stay alive, but I'm questioning even that now too. And I'm also realizing that this promise doesn't pay off. Axel doesn't bring his friends back. Other characters do. How have I only realized that now? Okay, let's gather our thoughts. By this stage in the video, my ideas and beliefs on each character's revival are beginning to overlap. I've said how Roxas couldn't come back to life without Namine, how Xion's return would also depend on Roxas and Axel, etc. So let's take a moment to discuss these 4 character revivals in various combinations. Axel has to stay alive because his reawakening is a huge contribution to post-KH2 canon. Even in spite of my revelation, if I were to hypothesize a version of the story where he stayed dead, I'd have to rewrite everything since. We'd need a different Guardian of Light, the other members would remain gone too, meaning different darknesses, so everything surrounding him needs to stay. Now, if you want a generally happy ending, I would advocate for Axel, Roxas, and Namine returning, with the rare lingering thought of a certain someone breaking through before immediately vanishing out of mind. This way, you could have both a happily ever after and also have the player continue to be conscious of the stakes. It would also elevate certain moments of canon even further. In fact, in all my ramblings about the game, I've neglected to mention the best scene in Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm not simple-minded, I believe in nuanced opinions, and early on in the story, as the characters re-established themselves, we get an example of beautiful writing.
So tomorrow, you and me in the ring. You ready?
Of course.
Don't hold back, Lee. Promise? Are you okay? Lee!
Logically built up, perfect characterization. This scene lives to me as a portal into the timeline where the writing that I love never faded. And if everyone returned except Gian, you could craft moments like these, almost like a jump scare. A flash of a forgotten memory whenever you least expect it. Alternatively, despite what I said about her, I'm also compelled by the idea of Namine and Axel returning only. Both are their own people, yet share a transparent connection to Roxas, but the absence makes the memory of him all the stronger. Without him, what would happen? Well, perhaps Namine, now alone, would have a much easier time connecting with Sora, Riku, and Kairi. A Destiny family, perhaps. Axel would be left behind, but that makes sense, doesn't it? He was a nobody for 10 years. He's due a fresh start, a brand new life. I think there's something to this possibility, especially as we now know reviving these two characters was only the result of outside input. But hold on, this doesn't make sense either. If Nomura planned on keeping Roxas and Xion with their original fates, why were they in blank points?
Sora.
That is the purpose of this ending sequence, isn't it? To prophesize their return and establish excitement for the conclusion of this saga. Not to mention the scenes in the following installment too. Well, there are a few theories. One, this scene wasn't meant to guarantee their returns, but only offer the possibility and elevate Sora's journey. Two, this interview is mistranslated. Always keep that thought in your mind. Or three, this series only follows an actual thought when it feels like it. There is one other thing niggling in my brain. If these characters got to live in the end, that wouldn't necessarily remove the stakes, because there was one person who I think nigh all of us believed was never coming back. Their death was a long time ago after all. Their story was bleak and it was finished. And I suppose that's still true in 3 as well. But compared to the emotions I had last time, the feelings weren't very well replicated.
You're strong. Real thing.
I've talked about the creepiness of the romanticization of Riku Replica, but I really think I need to shine a spotlight on this scene.
You want to remake my heart?
Any objections, Vexen? After all, you do want to test Sora, don't you?
It must be done.
How can you? Are you betraying me?
I told you I would make good use of you, didn't I?
No.
Relax, kiddo. I don't think it's gonna hurt that much.
I'll hurt you!
Stupid little toy. Think you could defeat me? Along with everything else in your head, Namine will erase the memory of me knocking you flat. Instead, she will implant the loveliest little memories you could ever hope for. It's no big deal that they're all lies.
No. No!
Can you name a more viscerally uncomfortable scene across Kingdom Hearts? Larksin's smile. The scream. Kingdom Hearts has plenty of dark imagery across the lore, but not often are the implications painted so explicitly for us to witness. And I can't let that go when I watch his story in 3. I'm not even sure why he's still yearning for Namine. In the closing hours of Chain of Memories, that aspect of him didn't matter anymore. By the end of the game, he was a broken murderer with no aspirations to call his own. I suppose we're led to believe in his final moments he had an epiphany about his purpose and that led to his change of heart. But that contrast between then and now, I just can't logically comprehend it. Nor can I perpetuate that he and Namine have any kind of connection. Riku Replica and his sister Gian have a lot in common. Both created by Vexen, both destined to die, and both return in ways I couldn't explain to you. It's not a shining crown of achievement for a story when I feel obligated to read a character's wiki page to understand their return. This highlights the issue that applied to Gian too. A character met their end, and there was no logical method of reviving them. But it's worse in this case, because this story wants to have it both ways. ways. It wants to bring everyone back, including characters where it made no sense to, yet it also wants the same character to die again despite the newly incorporated law making this death easily avoidable. This character's purpose is to save Namine, but I don't at all feel he was needed for that. Not when immortality has become so easy to harness. I also don't like having more than one character around with this exact character model. There was always debate over whether the replica or the possessed Riku was what appeared inside Monstro, and I always found the latter much preferable for character writing. But those are all minor criticisms. In the end, it all comes down to the romanticization. As if Larxene is the one writing the character, insisting he has a connection with Namine despite her never mentioning him, brainwashing him into believing he has this fate he didn't need to have. Maybe his ending is still beautifully tragic, but only if you look through the fourth wall a little. Why was this character brought back? Because of fan service obligation. Everyone else returned, so I suppose he had to as well. Get out of my sight. But while we're on the subject of this character's replica, maybe now's the best time to address a fleeting little topic of conversation in the lead up to Kingdom Hearts 3. I don't know that many actually believed Riku would die, but the possibility was out there. Should he have? Always hard to say for such a bold decision, but his character arc reached its climax. The battle ahead was foretold to have greater stakes than any before it, and if anyone was going to... I can say this because Riku's my favorite character. Sometimes nothing solidifies a person's love for a character more than watching them die. There's a shrine in Cardiff of a character from a Doctor Who spin-off. Death is a hell of a way to cement a legacy. You don't have to think very hard to imagine a scenario in which Riku's life would be taken, either by someone else or by himself. Think on it, for just a minute. Possibilities will come to you. Alternate scenarios will form in your mind. I won't decide if those ideas were better, but it's always something worth thinking about. Then again, we all know Riku's character kinda died in 3 anyway. Oh!
Why do you despise the void?
I suppose my thesis on Xehanort Heartless can be largely recycled for this segment, specifically regarding demoting a primary antagonist to minion status as a result of trying to up the ante from before. In this instance, however, it's a little different and a little personal. Because across this series, it's hardly a hot take, Xemnas is the best villain.
No matter what misery befalls the worlds, no matter what you think, what you feel, or how you exist.
Manipulation and brainwashing is a staple of Xehanortism, but while Master Xehanort had to work a little harder to lead characters into his plans, Xemnas managed to form a cult of slaves that tend to his demands every day for years and years without even moving from his chair. The horror and intimidation from simply existing was enough to establish how threatening he was. Not only that, but I can't fathom a single reason why he wouldn't be stronger than Master Xehanort too. He has all that knowledge and ability with the power of youth and being a nobody on his side. I don't know if you'll agree, but I always assumed nobodies were automatically stronger than their human counterparts, Roxas being the complicated exception. Additionally, is it just me, or does Xemnas in Dream Drop Distance just behave differently than how he used to? The demeanor with which he carries himself is distinctly unlike how it was in 2. Less emotionless expressiveness, a little more enjoyment in the moment. I suppose he had that in 2, but something isn't quite lining up between his mannerisms along the 2 games. Once I work it out, I'll suggest we sort that out too. Actually, Xigbar is off too, but I digress. Xemnas' existence as the second in command, if that, feels a little bizarre. Still, the need to resurrect him makes sense. You couldn't revive one half by itself, and additionally, we needed the other half to explain the reveal of the organization having hearts all along. Should I discuss this plot twist and elaborate on if it was the right move? Another day, I think. Either way, I already approved the return of the Heartless, so the Nobody must return too. And as the two of them go hand in hand, it only makes sense to follow a similar story idea. Xemnas may not be the main villain anymore, but he can still carry the terror of one. Following our train of thought from before, if Riku's story with Xehanort's Heartless were to end at the midway point of Dream Drop Distance, this would also be where the story of Sora versus Xemnas begins. But it'd need something more, something different. Nobodies are a fascinating, naturally sympathetic specimen after all, so let's make it a character study. Towards the very end of the second Travis Town visit, the midway point of the game, this could be Xemnas' first substantial, important appearance. After Sora's parted with the Shibuya gang, he makes to leave, but to his discomfort, that's when Xemnas appears. He's arrived specifically with the purpose of leading Sora into the trap of the final world. Travis Town disappears around them and an arena forms in its place. We have a boss battle that's challenging, yet also indicates Xemnas is holding back. From there, we run into him across every subsequent world instead of young Xehanort. And across their interaction, Xemnas taunts and places Sora's morals into perspective, questioning how he can so confidently slaughter his kind simply on the belief that they aren't people, questioning what makes his definition of a person the correct one, questioning why Sora believes his opponents are emotionless when evidence to the contrary exists. As much as I loved Xemnas from the beginning, the moral aspect of Sora destroying him and his group could have been a little further explored, which is why I believe we should take advantage of it. Perhaps resultingly, with all this extra food for thought planted in the player's brain, the twist would consequentially feel all the more stunning. Ooh, I'm getting quite into these ideas now. I hope you're finding this exciting too. And just like Xehanort's Heartless, if the groundwork is laid thickly enough, all Kingdom Hearts 3 would need is a one-on-one or perhaps two-on-one boss fight that's at least as jaw-dropping as it was before. The perfect recipe for true finality that isn't written embarrassingly. You know, I have vague memories of playing 358 for the first time and confusing Xemnas and Saïx. I think I'm justified, in addition to carving an X in his head, the latter decided he wanted almost the same haircut too. If we ever get his backstory, it's going to be so embarrassing. Anyway.
There's simply too much on the line.
Like I said before, in preparation for this video, I replayed the game where he appears most often, which means every evil moment of Saïx lives fresh in my mind. Every single one. No need to repeat myself, everything I said about this man's total non-character arc is still true. But what was it that I said towards the end last time? So that's why I don't like Isa. And it's not like I'm opposed to the idea of a redemption story for him. Right. Yeah, to avoid backlash, I might have lied a bit. I'm sure you could write an Isa redemption if you put actual effort into it, and when I say effort, I mean addressing every detail of his actions explicitly. But on the other hand, I am weared thin by redemptions being handed out so routinely. So what if Isa wasn't forgiven instead? Perhaps Axel wants to forgive him. Maybe even after everything that's happened, there's still a tiny glimmer of hope inside him that everyone can be back together again. But have you ever tried to rekindle a failed friendship? If you have, you might be luckier than I. But even in a series such as this, the lesson that not every friendship can work out ultimately is a lesson everyone should be taught. And it's what makes the most sense to me. Bring Saïx back. Maybe give him a moment of redemption, provided the moment is earned. But let things end from there. Taking into account everything, that's almost charitable of me. And I suppose if I talk about this former monster, I should do the same for the Human Experimentation Squad. Or maybe I shouldn't, because I'm tired. I'm tired of thinking about them, the lack of accountability for their horrific actions, and being put in a bad mood as a result. I'd say bring them back as villains maybe, but they wouldn't serve much purpose, and again, bloated cast is bloated. I just really hate these guys. I suppose the actually hundreds of years old mastermind deserves a mention. Do you want to know what my exact reaction was to this reveal? Well, I'll recreate it for you.
Haven't heard that name in a long while.
Sure, why not? Xigbar always was a bit of a wild card, with teasers for whatever potential backstory grabbed Nomura's interest in the end. He could just as easily have been Sora's grandfather, or the person who mysteriously sent Pluto to all those places, or Sora's dinner. Oh God. It doesn't bother me especially, but whenever I see someone refer to him by that name, I just want to give up. What will I do when 5 years from now videos emerge about Mr. Master of Masters and all the hints that built up to it? And speaking of...
If only the whispers at the top carried to the bottom.
A valuable lesson was learned from 9 through 12. These 4 members were one of the greatest sources of mystery and headcanons. Their names were never clarified, their identities never explored, yet despite all of the discussion, no one ever really predicted the backstories we eventually learned of them. And upon finding out, I finally learned the value of not knowing every detail of every pissing character's life and being allowed to dream a little, especially when the added backstories involve an ancient Keyblade legacy. Many years ago now, before Kingdom Hearts 3, I think this was the first ever story edition that really got under my skin. Not as much as Larxine's, mind you. God forbid the bitchy sadist be a bitchy sadist just because she likes being a bitchy sadist. About a decade ago, I read a fanfic that told the tale of how Demyx became a nobody by being tragically tricked and manipulated by Larxine into losing his heart. It wasn't especially in character and didn't line up with canon much, but I will gladly accept it as what happened over where actual canon is going, because Demyx was given the story that he should have, aka being a normal guy who happened to have a strong heart. That's what makes these characters interesting. Not that they were always at the center of importance, but were regular people who happened to have a strong will. Okay, regular people is a stretch, they're all psychos given their willingness to steal millions of hearts for personal gain. But if there was ever a one-way ticket to losing my interest in a character, it's making them infinitely more important than they ever needed to be. Let me take a moment to remind you of 3 wonderful characters whom I will always love. Paina, Pence, and Olette. Do you know why I love them? Because in a universe of superhuman children and godlike powers, they're just normal kids. With summer holidays, homework, petty rivalry, and married couple bickering. It seems they're the only characters left who are free from Nomura's burning need to give them the all-super-important retroactive backstory. Although, knowing my luck, remember me when the KH4 post-credit scene reveals black-hooded, Keyblade wielder number 94 who shares the same voice actor as Pence.
Get that off a fortune cookie?
I can handle Luxord's somebody story for now at least. Being a black market Final Fantasy character taxi driver, that's a pretty fun idea. But recently, when asked about Demyx, Nomura of course replied that he'll reveal the truth one day. Leave the characters I love alone. Look at this secret report from 358. It's got more endearing and engaging characterizing than whatever's in store for the Melodious Nocturne in the future. Also, an additional note on the problem with the reappearances of the organization members. Given how they've visually grown over the years and the detail of them all having hearts, the more we see and learn of them with every game, the more apparent it has become that nobodies do in fact age. Except in 2009, Nomura told us that nobodies don't age. Who even cares anymore, right? I'll give a little credit though. Thanks for not taking the lazy route and going with Lemuria and Arlene. That was never a great headcanon, was it? Then again, during my editing research, I've discovered Lemuria is a species of plant. And if you rearrange the letters in Vexen and remove the X, you get the Portuguese translation of snow. Rest in peace, Diamond Opportunity.
It's always the same. I try to wrap my mind around things my heart already knows.
God, what a stupid idea. What a monumentally, blatantly thoughtless move that could only be devised by someone who adopted a hedgehog, mistakenly used it as a comb one evening, got a few too many spikes stuck in their brain, and now operates on a diet of biro pens and hedgehog droppings. Let me break it down. The whole setup for bringing dead characters back hinges on Ansem hiding a clue within Sora, which he later leaves with Riku to solve. It's his parting gift, his last remaining method of amending the damage he caused. So, if he comes back anyway, what was the point of this plot thread? Nothing was gained from this new information that he passed on because he's free to just bounce back in and sort it out himself. The main heroes aren't challenged with figuring anything out. No, the thought of something interesting happening is strictly forbidden in KH Writing Incorporated. This is like if midway through Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore popped out of a tree and said, "Hurry, I'm alive again! No need to work things out on your own, I'll sort this out, back to bed with you." Additionally, reviving him alongside the experimentation gang only works if you're willing to address how fucked up their Unit 731 antics were. But you're not going to, so just throw them all out. You didn't even need Ienzo to help further this plotline. Get Sid to do it instead. All this nonsense about how FF characters need to be super relevant to be included, there you go. Have Sid be the science guy who works the replica piss out. Maybe have them kidnap and tie up Vexen, forcing him to tell them how to do it. That not believable enough for you? Okay. Maybe use this as an excuse to bring in some sciencey Disney characters for help. Call up Dr. Finkelstein or Geppetto or I don't know, Jessica Rabbit. Look, you've got an endless cast of characters you can use whenever you feel like it, so instead of reviving villains and then hand-waving away all of their villainy, maybe work with what you've got and produce something no one is expecting but ultimately works and proves a pleasant surprise. I should take a moment to say I realize how pretentious this video may sound a lot of the time. Look at me telling you how Kingdom Hearts should and shouldn't be written. As if I'm a qualified writer with a degree in storytelling and not a friendless emo with access to thesaurus.com. Why should I talk about this series like I know it better than anyone else? The obvious answer is I don't. And I'm ultimately not taking this essay too seriously because my opinion doesn't matter any more than yours. Or even watch Mojo's. But I'll tell you one fact for free. The perfectionism and passion I pour into every minute of every video I make on this channel exists as such. All because of just how much I think about this series every day of my life. And while the creators are the ones with the most control and personal history with their story, a story which is ultimately theirs, I don't know if you heard, J.K. Rowling thinks Death Eaters are just like trans activists. Not exactly a one-to-one comparison, but basically, sometimes creators lose track of the worlds they've created, and that's why it might be worth hearing a fan out once in a while. I won't tell you how two characters feel about each other without evidence, at least. Back to Ansem. The established purpose of his grand appearance and the exciting ending of two games that sets the entire subject of this video in motion is rendered pointless by him appearing anyway. But even before that, why would you want to mess with that incredible farewell scene?
Xehanort, foolish apprentice of a foolish man. You have surpassed nothing, only proved how little we both know.
The presentation of this scene is immaculate. The dialogue between Ansem and Xemnas is gripping as can be. Every line plays to the strengths of the story up to this stage, emphasizing the finality of this trilogy at large. The music feels more impactful than ever. The shots it leads to of the hearts falling from the sky into the helpless dusks, the chasm of crawling shadows it creates. It's one of the best put together scenes in the franchise. In fact, Ansem is maybe the most underrated character in the series. He's layered, complicated, undoubtedly yet understandably flawed. Given his backstory and considering a good chunk of the fandom reaction to him, one could argue his writing is too good for this series as well. Is there a way to bring him back and have it work? I'm sure there's some good idea out there somewhere, but to do so would be to make a lot of different decisions and go in an accountability-ridden direction that this series is too far gone to take. Well, I think that's it. The heroes, the villains, the in-betweens, and the many revivals discussed in all of their execution and potential. Is there any conclusion to be drawn? If there is, I think we should hold it back for a moment. Because I've just remembered, there's one final reverse death that needs our attention. This video could only ever end this way, really. Sora died, and not long after he died, we learned he's going to be okay. I think I've been down this road before. I don't love Sora's first death either. The writing of the scene itself is borderline perfect, but its impact could have done with lasting a little longer than 2 minutes. But as short-lived as it was, this was in 2002. Long before the series was established as a franchise, and long before Nomura told us again and again that Sora will always be the protagonist as long as Kingdom Hearts carries on. We witnessed this moment with a much different context than before. Thanks to everything before it, every revival, every nonsensical bit of writing, every moment that exists as an advertisement for the next entry, the death of the main character feels most harmless of all. Because when I look at it, my only feeling is that it was simply a thing that happened. That's also why I'm ignoring Kairi's death in this video. It was just a thing that happened. And that summarizes my reaction to Kingdom Hearts in its current state. Things are happening, and that's all. Rewatching this scene, there's such a different feeling to it. It doesn't matter if it was obvious that Sora would survive or not. The story up to now earned the moment. And of course, a death only ever hits hard if everything surrounding it had an impact on you as well, regardless of whether or not the outcome is obvious. Sometimes I wonder if those feelings of mine will ever be recaptured again. Other times, I wonder if I will live to see how it ends. A little pessimistic, but I don't think it's too absurd. Stories aren't allowed to end anymore. Even when you think they have, the extended media seems inevitable. Monetization comes first, after all. Story consequences be damned. I quite like the idea of living in a world where stories always have the conclusion they deserve. To see every story have that natural last page. It's a complicated subject, storytelling. I can never accurately pick and choose what I truly wish to have happened. But to feel the emotional weight of every story beat as they occur on every page, and to have them be cemented as they are forever without any change, to have these stories immortalized when they were at their greatest forever. Yeah. That'd be my happy ending.
Do you think your quest will ever be over?
I don't know. But I think, as long as the Keyblade stays with me, I'll have to keep fighting.
I'll have these moments memorized for a long time. Forever.